Hey, this is Hunter with Lone Star Woodworking, and in this video I build probably my coolest coffee table ever. I packaged it up to where there's no possible way you could screw it up if you tried, and the shipping service said hold my beer. Alright guys, so if you follow me on social media, you know I've been working on a dining table, coffee table package for a couple of really good friends of mine. The husband is actually somebody that I was in the Marines with towards the end of my contract, and we went to the same school together to learn how to be tower climbers. And we actually worked together here in Houston for about a year before I moved on to my next job and he moved back to Kansas. His wife, who actually commissioned me to build these two pieces, is this social media guru, and she and I were talking, and I was asking her if there was a way I could, hire her or, just kind of get her advice. And she said, yeah, sure, but I would like you to build me some furniture. And I said, okay, we can talk about that. And so we did. And she gave me all kinds of advice on how to grow on social media. And I think I saw 300 new followers within a week and something like 2,000 new likes on some of my posts on Instagram. And that is my slowest growing platform for me. So that was absolutely crazy, and we eventually landed on I'm going to build her a coffee table and a dining table. And honestly, even if I were selling these to her at full price, she is worth way more with her skills in social media than these two tables ever were. So I'm going to ask her if she's okay with me providing her information and possibly doing freelance work for some of you who might be having the same issue that I was having. You'll know her answer based on if you see her information in the video description. Now, something I don't hear a lot of creators on YouTube who build these types of tables talk about is the design of the table. You've seen people build the stereotypical river table over and over and over again, hundreds of times. And I'm not knocking you if that's what you like to do and if that's your favorite style. I'm just saying that from my perspective, and just from the perspective of many other people that I have talked to, it's always better to have more wood and make the wood the focal point of the piece and only use epoxy pretty much as a filler. It's only there to give you the desired shape that you want while still keeping the natural shape of the wood. And that's just my 2 cents on it. I prefer those kind of designs, and you can look back at any of my videos and you'll see that that is exactly the case. I love to put big pieces of the slab in the center and then kind of fill in the corners with the offcuts. That's one of my favorite ways to do these. So again, take it for what it's worth, which could mean absolutely nothing to you. It's just an opinion. Now, the cleanup on these was actually pretty difficult on these small pieces, mostly because of that burl edge. But something I want you to pay attention to here is after I pick off the bark in that little crotch section right there, I'm going to hit it with the nylon wheel and a ton of dust is going to come off. Okay, and that's not bark, that's not dirt. I mean, some of it might be dirt, but for the most part, that is something called fascia. And what that is a tiny membrane that actually still attaches itself to the wood after you remove the bark. And if you don't remove that fascia, it can cause your table to delaminate over time, same way if you were to just leave the bark on in its entirety. So it's just something else to pay attention to whenever you're building these tables. Now, for some reason, there's this kind of contentious debate in the epoxy woodworking community on how to properly seal your slabs before an epoxy pour. I don't really understand why it's contentious. For me, it's to each their own. I'm going to give you the reason why I use shellac. The reason I use shellac is because it's economical, and it works just as good as sealing your slabs with epoxy, which is what you'll see other people do. I can go spend $17 on a can of shellac, and I know that I'll be able to seal 5, 6, maybe even 7 tables worth of wood and have it work just as well as deep pour epoxy would. Now, my deep pour epoxy is about $200 for every 3-gallon kit, and it absolutely pains me to think about using about $50 of it in order to just seal a slab and waste, whatever 1/4 of 3 gallons is. So that's why I prefer to use shellac. Again, it doesn't have to mean absolutely anything to you, it's just my 2 cents. Now, that being said, if you've enjoyed some of the information that I've given, and if you think that this is a channel that you'd want to subscribe to and, keep helping me grow, keep watching, keep learning, I would greatly appreciate it. And you'll see that I actually am really good about responding to everybody in the comments. I love the interactions from you guys. And honestly, any kind of interaction. It doesn't matter if it's a like, a comment, a subscription, any of that. I really, really do appreciate all of it. And I'm going to try to show that appreciation sometime soon with a table giveaway, because I don't think that I would be anywhere near where I'm at without some of y'all's support, because I've gotten clients from you guys before, and that's just absolutely awesome. So it's just kind of something I want to do in order to give back to the YouTube community. Now, I've gotten a couple of questions recently on why I almost exclusively use jet black epoxy. And the answer to that is pretty simple, and I did answer this one time in one of my other videos titled I Finally Impressed My Wife, where I built her a Jatoba coffee table using jet black epoxy. And the answer there and the answer here is it just fits with everything. I've never been disappointed with the way black looks. It always looks good. And on top of that, I talked about how I like to have more wood and really just use the epoxy as a filler. And I don't want it to be super distracting the way that these metallic and pearlescent pigments are whenever you swirl them. So that's why I like to use black. It's subtle and allows the wood to maintain its status as the star of the show in these tables. Now, you saw me trying to do some initial fixes after I planed everything down, and this is just kind of the nature of working with cookies. There's always going to be an infinite amount more of checks and cracks that you're going to have to deal with. But some of them I filled with epoxy, and again, we've already discussed how cookies are end grain, and end grain is just a bunch of straws, so it was kind of absorbing more of the epoxy than I wanted it to, and it caused this kind of leopard pattern discoloration. So I'm coating all of the wood in a really thin coat of epoxy just to kind of even out the color. And then I'm also taking this opportunity to fill in some of the cracks that are just being a little bit more stubborn. I think this was maybe 2 or 3 days later, so that tabletop epoxy had cured nice and hard, and I was removing it all with some 80 grit, really trying not to scuff everything up, because I have noticed that whenever you put a epoxy coat on, the scratches from your sandpaper, if you do it improperly, are way more noticeable. After I got everything kind of knocked down from those corrections, it was time to square everything up to 31 by 31 and do my last round of corrections. And I'm using this thick CA glue because I really didn't want the medium or the thin CA glue soaking down into the crack before I had a chance to hit it with the activator. And you'll see here that a lot of these aren't like big major cracks opening up. I got most of those closed up. They're just really, really tiny dots that I need to fix and fill up. Now, I could have probably ignored these, and honestly, it probably wouldn't have made a huge difference to the client and her husband, but these are really good clients. They're super nice people. I'm very good friends with them. And I wanted to give them as perfect of a product as possible, especially after how much she helped me out. And with my last round of corrections done, it was time to sand everything off and work my way up to 320. Now, as I normally do, I worked my way up to 120 because it's still, high enough to where I've actually made some significant progress, but not so high that it won't be difficult to get any scratches out that are left over from the router after I put this edge profile on. And I wanted to do something different here. I'm not tired of that 22 degree chamfer, but I did want to do something that just a little bit different. And I saw this on Google where you just put a 45 degree chamfer on every sharp edge. So all the corners and all of the edges. And I thought that looked pretty cool. Now, this is something that has actually been in my inventory for quite some time. but it just finally decided to work its way into a video. That's a branding iron that my wife gave me something like 2 years ago, and it just, for some reason, finally made its way into a video. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking, Hunter, that is an absolutely offensive amount of Rubio Monocoat, I would agree with you. I used about 3/4 of the can on just trying to saturate the slab. But again, you got to think, it's end grain. So it's soaking up this finish like nobody's business. So I promise you that amount of Rubio Monocoat was absolutely necessary. And here you'll see, after a day, I went out and I scuffed it up with a maroon pad on my DeWalt sander, and you can still see there are some significantly dry areas. So what we're going to do with this second coat is we're going to use a significantly more conservative amount. We're going to saturate those areas that were a little bit dry and add that extra layer of protection that you get with that second coat. And this is the final product for the top. And this is by far one of my favorite tabletops that I've ever made. And this is the exact video I sent the client. She thought it looked great. I thought it looked great. We were ready to attach the base, get some good pictures in, and finally send this thing off. Now, this is a typical base that you can get from Flowy Line Design. You guys have seen me use him a dozen times. He's a really good guy, and I highly recommend it. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of this base. It left a lot of leverage on the edges, but it looked good nonetheless, and I absolutely love the contrast of the wood to the table, or the epoxy. I think this looked great. The client thought it looked great, and we were ready to send this thing off. So what I did is I double wrapped it in some really thick furniture blankets. I took it to the UPS store. I asked them, hey, I'm sending this to Kansas. Can you put Fragile on it? This is an expensive tabletop. Please don't mess this up. And they said, yeah, sure, no problem. And this is how it showed up. I was not happy at all. I'm sure the clients were incredibly disappointed, but what's going to happen is they're actually going to come down to Texas to get their dining table. So we're going to try to fix it then. All right, guys, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. See ya.